I'm going to begin with some full disclosure. I am President and Chief Executive Officer of an oil and natural gas producing company. And whenever you say that, this is what people hear. This is who's speaking. So I want to be clear, that's not me, and I don't know anybody like that. So if I may, I'm just going to introduce myself for a second. Why am I here? What drives me? Why do I talk about Canadian energy? I am passionate about energy, every kind of energy, and I'm also passionate about this country. The day you are born in or move to this country, you have won the lottery of life. The freedoms we have here, the opportunities we have, the safety and security we enjoy every day, the beauty and expanse of the landscape is unattainable virtually anywhere else in the world. We are very fortunate people. I'm very passionate about this country. Let's talk energy. This is energy scarcity. When you do not have energy, you don't have reliable water, you don't have reliable food, housing, hospitals, schools, roads. You live in abject poverty. This is energy abundance. When you have energy abundance, you're living the high life. I show Mr. DiCaprio here. We all know him. He's been to Alberta many times. So have some of his colleagues, James Cameron, Jane Fonda. They criticize the energy industry. And of course, they're very welcome here. We're very welcoming people here in Alberta, and we welcome people's views. But it's easy to criticize when you live in this kind of energy abundance. I show this picture because in 2014, Mr. DiCaprio and his colleagues went to Brazil, to Rio de Janeiro, and they stayed on this yacht while they flew around to the various soccer games of the World Cup of Soccer, which were taking place all over Brazil. So I looked up the yacht Topaz. It's the 5th biggest private yacht on Earth. It's 480 feet long, a football field and a half, staff of 79, 60 guests, 2 8,000 horsepower engines. It cost $650 million to build. It has 2 helipads. I circled the one on the bow and there's one on the stern. And you kind of have to understand Mr. DiCaprio's position. You kind of need 2 helipads because I don't know most of you, but I do know that every single one of you has had the experience of arriving on your yacht in your helicopter only to find that your spouse has already landed their helicopter on the helipad. I mean, really, you kind of need 2 helipads. I kid about Mr. DiCaprio, but I would say as Canadians, there's a bit of Mr. DiCaprio in all of us. I'll talk about that. Let's talk about the numbers. There's 7.5 billion people on this planet, 7.5 billion. From an energy standpoint, about 1.5 billion live as we do. So that's Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Europe. And we consume on average 34 barrels of oil a year per person. Now that's all forms of energy expressed in oil. So that's nuclear, solar, that's wind, that's geothermal, that's oil and gas. 34 barrels. We are the lucky ones on the planet. The next 2.5 billion people, so I give some examples here, China, Mexico, use about 14 barrels of energy a year. The next 2.5 billion, Egypt, India, 4 barrels. And there's almost 1 billion people on this earth that consume 1 barrel of energy a year. Most of that energy comes from coal, wood, and dung. In 2019, people are burning dung to heat their meals. As your energy consumption decreases, your quality of life decreases, your life expectancy decreases, your education decreases, your chance of dying from respiratory failure greatly increases because you're burning cruder and cruder forms of energy. And does anybody here think that those 6 billion people on this planet, 6 billion who don't get to live as we do, does anybody here think that they don't want to live our quality of life? Does anybody here think they don't deserve to live our quality of life? We need to get this world energy, every kind of energy, solar, wind, nuclear, geothermal, tidal, oil and gas. We need to get this world energy. Put it all in perspective, the average Canadian, 67 barrels of energy a year. We use twice the average of the developed world. Why is that? Well, we all know it's a big and cold country. We also are involved in many energy-consuming industries. Oil and gas is an energy-consuming industry. So is mining, so is agriculture, so is forestry, so is making cars, planes, steel, aluminum. We have many energy-intensive industries, and we lead a very high quality of life. We come to nice venues like this. We have nice homes. We heat them. We air condition them. We travel a lot. We take our kids to hockey and soccer. All those things take energy. We lead a high quality of life. Let's talk about renewables. I'm a huge fan of renewables. This is fascinating technology. It's changing by the day. It's difficult to keep up. In the last 15 years, the global supply of energy from renewables has gone from about 1 to 9 million barrels a day. So again, I'm expressing in barrels of oil equivalent. So say 0 to 10, keep the numbers round. And I do love this technology. I zoom in here on Palm Desert, where they have a huge wind farm, 4,000 wind turbines there for anybody who's been there. It's an amazing site. My wife and I went there in May. It's the first time we've been there, and it was her birthday. So the weekend was all about her. Money was clearly no object. So I took her for a tour of the wind farm facility. I have to remind her every day how fortunate she is. But I do love this stuff, you know. But here's the same renewable energy shown to the scale of other sources of energy on the planet today. In the same time, renewables have gone from 0 to 10. Just the increase in oil, natural gas, and coal has been about 75 million barrels. People talk about the age of hydrocarbons is over. It is not over. It'll be the primary source of energy on this planet for many decades to come. And I'm a huge believer in moving to a low-carbon economy. I'll talk about that. So let's tumble through the numbers. Today, the average person on the planet uses 13.4 barrels of oil a year. And the planet emits 32 gigatons of CO2. I believe in climate change. I believe we have to reduce our emissions and we have to do something about it. So today, a little over 50% of the planet's energy comes from oil and gas, about a quarter from coal, and the balance from renewables, nuclear, biomass, and so on. So what happens? If we're going to follow the Paris Climate Accord, by 2040, there'll be 9 billion people on Earth. The average person will consume 11 barrels of oil a year, and we're going to emit 18.3 gigatons of CO2, so a 40% reduction. That's a worthwhile goal. That's a noble goal. But still, 50% of the planet's energy will come from oil and gas. So what has to change? Well, coal is going to diminish. Renewables will continue to increase. We have to go back to nuclear for power generation. It's too important of an energy source. And we have to get more efficient. We don't talk very much about efficiency. We're so busy fighting about sources of energy. We have to get efficient. Today, for every barrel of energy we use about a third to our intended purpose, to drive your car, to fly a plane. 2/3 is rejected as waste heat. So that's a good news, bad news story. We're only using a third. Surely we can do better than that. And if we do better, we'll get to a low-carbon world, and the world will be a wonderful place. So that's the good news. The bad news is Mr. William Stanley Jevons. Mr. William Stanley Jevons was a British economist, and he wrote that as technology improves to increase efficiency, you actually use more energy, not less. He wrote this in 1865. He was referring to the use of coal in the British Industrial Revolution, but it's still true today. I'll show some examples. You know, the 1960s, people had a family car. That's not my family, but we had a car just like that. And life was good. You know, my dad got to work. We went skiing once in a while. We went camping. We had a car. Life was good. Fast forward to today, your typical suburban scene. Well, what happened? Well, cars got cheaper relative to income. There's more roads. There's better roads. They're safer. You can get there faster. We go further on a liter of gasoline. We got more and more efficient, and every year we use more and more gasoline. Same with lighting. You know, this family, again, 1960s bungalow, they have their Christmas lights on. Santa's going to come here. He's going to come down their chimney. They're in the spirit. And then we invented LED bulbs. How fantastic is that? 1/10 the electricity of incandescent bulbs. Just think of all the energy we're going to save. Now, Mr. Jevons, it's known as Jevons Paradox. Mr. Jevons unfortunately died in 1882 at the ripe old age of 43, but I'm very happy to say that his spirit is alive and well in Victoria, B.C., and it's alive and well in our nation's capital. I'm not picking on these cities. I can show any city in the country. Let's talk about emissions. Emissions are important. There's a lot of pressure, policy, to reduce emissions in the oil and gas business, and we have to. We get no free pass, get out of jail free card. But I show here where emissions actually occur. So about 10% occur from the oil and gas companies. Another 10% is when we send it down the pipeline, refine it, get it to your gas station. But 80% of the emissions is our choice. When we start our car, go on a cruise, take a flight, buy a new iPhone. So we're never going to get to low emissions unless we change our ways, and that is not easy. Who has had this discussion around their kitchen table with their kids? Kids, we were going to go to Disneyland this year, and we're going to go see Mickey and Pluto and Space Mountain. That sounds like great fun. But Mom and Dad have been talking. We have another great idea. How about instead of emitting GHGs by flying to California, we stay home and we put an extra foot of insulation in our attic, and we replace our cheap double glazed windows with brand new triple glazed low E argon thermal windows. Come on, kids, how exciting is that? It's really easy to be an environmentalist when you tell other people what to do. It's really hard when you look at what we have to do. And our governments have to make more sense. At the same time, our governments are putting more and more regulation and burdens on the energy industry. They're subsidizing the automotive industry to build more pickup trucks and SUVs. The Ontario and federal government gave Honda $84 million to build more pickup trucks and SUVs. Ford got $200 million. Toyota was the big winner, $220 million to build more pickup trucks and SUVs. I have nothing against the automotive industry. We all need our cars. It's an important industry. But my little company, we have 25 people. We're 6 years old. In the last 6 years, we've invested $650 million into the Canadian economy. That's enough to build a yacht for the liking of Mr. DiCaprio. But we didn't do that. We drilled oil wells, gas wells. We built state-of-the-art natural gas processing facilities that will be paying royalties and taxes long after I'm dead and gone, and I intend to live for a very, very long time. We spent $650 million. Whenever the politicians make these announcements, they bring their camera crews. They want to get on the front page of the paper on the evening news. We spent $650 million. Not 1 cent of that money came from any level of government anywhere. Where the hell are the politicians? Why aren't they showing up in my office, shaking our hand, taking our picture, and getting us on the news for what we're doing for this country? Well, these politicians need to have some consistency in their performance. There's big pressure right now, too, not to invest in oil and gas on institutions, on investing in institutions, don't buy the equities, on banks, don't lend to the oil and gas industry, on insurance companies, don't insure the oil and gas industry. They're trying to shut the industry down. I've shown here the top 6 oil-producing nations on Earth and top 6 natural gas. I'll go through the flags because they're not all obvious. So on the oil side, United States, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Iran, Iraq, Canada. On the natural gas side, United States, Russia, Iran, Qatar, Canada, China. So let's say these people are successful. Nobody will invest in oil and gas anymore. The Canadian oil and gas industry shuts down. Well, we and the rest of the world are going to have to get our energy from these other countries, and we can do that. But let me ask you a question. First of all, there's only 2 countries you can invest in here. That's Canada and the United States. The rest is all state-owned. Let me ask you some questions. I'm going to include the United States in these questions. I'm not criticizing the United States. I'm a huge fan of the United States, but I will include them in these questions. If we're getting our energy and everybody else from these other countries, which one of these countries has higher worker safety standards than Canada? Which one of these countries has higher human rights standards than Canada? Which one of these countries has higher ethical standards than Canada? Which one of these countries has higher gender equality standards than Canada? Which one of these countries has greater Indigenous consultation standards than Canada? Which one of these countries has greater religious freedoms than Canada? Which one of these countries has greater environmental standards than Canada? If you believe in any of those issues, and I hope you believe in every single one, but if you believe in any of those issues, you should be doubling down on your investment in Canadian energy. I've had it up to my ears with some of these special interest groups who have vilified not just our industry, but our country in pursuit of their own self-interest. We're good at what we do here in Canada. We're damn good. We're the best in the world, and we need to stand up for ourselves. Every Canadian here knows this picture. It's the last spike. Boy, we had a lot of guts back then. In the late 1800s, B.C. wanted to join Confederation. They said, we'll join. Canada ended at the Ontario border, but you have to build us a railway, so we did. It was a hugely courageous, audacious project, and we did it. In the 1960s, we built the Trans-Canada Highway System, still the main artery of the nation. In the 1950s, we built a pipeline to take natural gas from Alberta to Eastern Canada. It gets a little cold there today, no problem. We had the guts to build this thing. They live in comfort and safety. This is the Valero refinery across from the Chateau Frontenac in Quebec City. 230,000 barrels a day of foreign oil comes in here every day. It's refined, distributed around Eastern Canada for their energy. There's no talk about shutting that down. That's important infrastructure. James Bay, 16,000 megawatts of electrical power. That's as much as all of Alberta. The reason Quebec has cheap, reliable, renewable power today is they had the guts to build this in the 1970s. Boy, we had a lot of guts back then. The Confederation Bridge, this is only 20 years ago. It was built to connect PEI to New Brunswick, improve the life for people on PEI. Can you imagine today trying to build a bridge through an ocean strait? You'd be shut down in a second. What happened? Do we have the courage to build in this country still? I hope so. You know, I don't care where you live in this country. I don't care how old you are. I don't care what your education is. I don't care who you vote for. I don't care what language you speak at home. I don't care what religion you practice. I don't care what color your skin is. I don't care who you sleep with at night. I don't care what you think about the economy. I don't care what you think about the environment. You lead a better life every single day as a Canadian because we had the guts to build these things. We need to get our guts back, our courage back, our mojo back, and start building this country again. We have to do it to the highest environmental standards in the world. We have to do it with full Indigenous consultation because that's what we do here in Canada. Let's get our mojo back and start building this country. I want to wish everybody here a life of responsible energy abundance, and I want to thank you for your time.